Hey guys, so I thought I was going to touch on something that came up during my lunch with some of my potential colleagues at Klarna. So we were discussing like programming languages and paradigms and different types of like the pros and the cons of languages. And one of the guys said something that's very near and dear to my heart. He said that every language has that one thing that makes it a good choice about other languages. And I like to think that noisy airport, sorry about that. And I like to, like I told him, like I like to agree, I would really like to agree with him. I do believe that every single programming language out in the world has something that it does really, really well. I also argue that there are languages who do, like, depending on your needs, because there's so many things that you should consider when you're picking a language for any given problem. And I mean, it's not just about, like, we like to talk about performance, and I keep telling people performance only matters up to a certain degree, then other things come into play and matter more, because if everything was about performance, hey, we would still write everything in assembly or C or C++, and we don't. So basically the performance is just another thing that people like to throw out there as the only, like, as something that matters, to give weight to their argument for something else. But let's get down to business, or let's get real. It's not always about performance. Sometimes it is, but it's not the exclusive thing. Anywho, so I agreed with him, and I was talking about like some languages, and I was basically saying that like why I'm so excited about Elixir is because I think that Erlang is a god-awful language. The syntax is absolutely horrible, which is my feelings on Objective-C as well. I think that it's so far out there in comparison to other languages that it's very painful for a beginner or somebody who isn't all that comfortable with the language to get into it. And the same thing goes for Haskell and so forth. I mean, these are languages, they have their place, but like if you look at the syntax and the language, I think that there is a very good reason why these languages are so different from what the most of the mainstream programming language. They kind of follow the same pattern. I think they do that for a very good reason, because familiarity is a very important thing when you're trying to get people to adopt something. Anywho, one of my colleagues comes out of nowhere or the potential colleagues, the guy working at Klarna, he comes out of nowhere with this amazing argument. And you've never heard this one before. I believe that a good programmer should be able to use any language, and it shouldn't matter which one you use. You should be able to learn it and be productive in it. That's the mark of a good programmer. And I just sighed on the inside, and I just got tired. And I got so tired that I kind of I still I keep a good straight face, and I kind of look at him and I say, oh yeah, absolutely, you're right. Like that is true. Every programmer, engineer or whatever, you should be able to produce code in any language, because that's kind of your job, is to like use computer science and code to solve problems. However, if that's the mentality here is, what I think that you're saying is that you should be able to. But is that what you're going for? I mean, I don't see a lot of companies hiring people who've only done Haskell to do Java development. Ideally, people like to see that the developers that they hire have some experience in the language that they're using. But if what you're saying is true, then that shouldn't matter, right? And I wasn't trying to be mean or anything. I said, like, I agree with you. Like, there is absolutely, like, a good developer should be able to be productive in any language. But there's a big difference between being able to do something and being really good at it and being efficient, and because what we're going for here is ideally you're not just supposed to be able to do it, you're supposed to be able to do it well and as fast as humanly possible with as few errors as possible. And that has a lot to do with why you choose a language. Very, very few people that I know, or in companies I know, will hire people who have no relevant experience, even if they're engineers. That's why we have code tests. That's why we have like all of this process to make sure that you're proficient enough in the language, or like for the requirements of the position that you're filling. I didn't say this to him, but to me that's like saying that, you know, okay, so if you're a short distance runner, 60-meter runner or 100-meter dash runner in the Olympics, and you're really good at running, that means that you should be able to now be a professional football player as well, right? Well, no. Or soccer, or whatever you want to call it. And to me, it's the same type of argument. Of course, like a sprint runner will be able to play the game, but he will not be able to play it as well as somebody who's been doing that exclusively. Ergo, the football player will not be as fast as the runner. And that's kind of where I think that he's wrong. I think this argument states a fact about or it's not a fact, it states a mindset of the person, like of how a programmer should think, like philosophically. You know, should be able to, you know, use any tool and be very productive, because you don't want to be specialized in one language. It's the same reason I argue that people should be very careful about picking Angular as their first like framework or something like that, because there are certain technologies that will box you in and make you, if you're just starting out, and you will feel very safe in these technologies, but you will also lose a lot of very important experiences. So this is the same idea, and I agree, like it's very healthy for you to test enough technologies to get good enough that you, as a computer guy or girl, so that you can use any language. But don't mistake that for having to be an expert in every language. That's just silly. It's just dumb. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure that guy himself, I mean, I could probably give him a few coding exercises in a few languages that he couldn't solve. And so, yeah, I don't like that argument. I think that what the more holistic and philosophical, if you want to be philosophical about this, a much more sane way of looking at it is the motto that I use, which, you know, this is me, so I like to think of it in terms that you should master the skills that you use every day, and you should practice the skills that you might need tomorrow. Because let's be honest, you can't learn everything, so it makes sense for you to really think about what things do you think are beneficial for you, and that changes over time. I mean, if you're just starting out learning programming, well, then it doesn't really matter what language you choose. You should just learn the basics of programming. But if you think about it think about it hard, like that argument is in of itself a little bit subjective as well. Because let's say that I wanted to start doing JavaScript programming. Well, I could start my first introduction to JavaScript with Elm, or in the compiled language is Haskell. And what would that be? Would you, like, if you ask yourself, if you're an experienced programmer, would you recommend these languages as a first language to a beginner? No, you wouldn't. The technology is there, like it's like the right tech, but you know, I think we both can agree on that a beginner starting with Elm isn't going to learn shit about JavaScript. They're going to learn Elm, and the problem with Elm is that it's not familiar enough to the other languages, so that you can start like to see the commonality between different languages. Same thing goes for Haskell. It's so vastly, or Brainfuck. These languages are so vastly different from most of the standards or like other languages out there that it's actually very damaging for a beginner to do that. And I think that there's a good thought there. That's why we recommend a beginner to start with Java or C# or Python or something that feels familiar, that like, they can learn the skills there and then start learning a new language because it's fairly similar. And when you reach a really senior level or like a more proficient level, then you'll go into the more tricky languages because you can, like, you've learned the syntax and the way of thinking so well that you can learn these harder languages that have a very different way of approaching a problem. I mean, I love Elixir. I would never recommend Elixir as a first language to a beginner. So if we already accept that some languages are easier to adopt and some are harder, I think my argument saying that Erlang is a fairly difficult language to work in I think it's a fairly fair assessment if you consider that. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't do stuff in it. Of course you can, but if you could measure complexity and productivity efficiently in that language versus other languages, I'm pretty sure you would find that it's a bit more difficult language for people to adopt and like get really productive in fairly quickly. That's why I love Elixir, and the reason is very simple. Erlang and this is my argument, I think Erlang and Objective-C and these languages, they were designed not to be a holistic, like a broadly used solution for a lot of different programmers. They were designed, these languages were made, or the technologies were made for very specific use cases by very specific people. And what happens when you develop something with the mindset that this is going to be used internally or like by like a certain group, you design the language or like whatever you're making for that group. That's how we build products. So I think that shows a lot in these languages. That's why I love, as I said, Elixir, because the approach, like, it's the same tech, same underlying tech, but the mindset when Jose Valim and these guys were developing the language was that they wanted to make a language for everyone, not just for Ericsson or like the people who were using Erlang, but for everyone. And that, I think, shows in the language. So, to summarize my little rant here, although it is true that you should strive to be able to produce quality code in every language, don't think that you have to be a master of everything. Be smart about the choices you make, because they will add up in the end.